Welcome everybody to the episode one show.
What up, Buster?
What up, Buster?
What up, Buster? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
you gotta hit the
You gotta
hard
hit the ER.
ER.
What up,
ER.
Buster?
Gotta hit
Mark
the
ass
hard
Bust,
ER.
Mark ass Buster. We're gonna lose all of our California listeners.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, we're covering Snowfall. This is by my request. I want to throw so you know what happened? I was
Mm.
I was I was scrolling Instagram and I saw this creator, this young guy. He's pretty funny. His name is Morgan Got Game. Shout out to at Morgan Got Game. I don't know why he does Snowfall impressions, but his Snowfall impression of Franklin Saint was so hilarious, and it just reminded me that I haven't seen that show in so long, and I really liked it. So I was like, let's do Snowfall. So Elijah agrees, and here we
I
are,
did. Here we are.
and
Yeah, it's
here we are.
yeah, yeah. I did not watch this show, so I'm actually really happy that you turned me onto it. Now I'm like, oh fuck, now I gotta watch this whole season because
Yeah,
it's just kind of fire.
it's kind of fire, right? Like you think it kind of sneaks up on you because you think it's just a gangster show, and it
Yeah.
is, but it's like a government intrigue show. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's an origin story. It's like it's actually a historical drama
Mm-hmm.
in a way, in a lot of ways. But I mean, it's clearly just based on true stories, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
almost like I thought it was kind of interesting. I want to do it in the pitch, but it's kind of like something that black people have been talking about for a long time, but
Mm-hmm.
it hadn't really been confirmed. So it's almost like a conspiracy theory that you've been hearing your whole
Right.
life
Right.
that has kind of recently got confirmed.
That's not quite a conspiracy.
Right?
The
Kind of like a lot of things, right?
yeah, all that stuff that your uncle was saying, where he was like, the government flooded the hood with cocaine and crack, and we're like, oh, you're crazy, uncle. Actually, that's exactly what happened to fund Contras in
Yeah.
various South American countries.
Yeah, I remember just like, being in I'm so far from California, right? So growing up, like my introduction to all of this type of stuff was rap, you know, like all these stories a lot of times was rap. If it wasn't like your uncles or your friends or, something like that, it was rap music because being in North Carolina, that's like your window to California, to New York, all these other Chicago, these other New Orleans, all these other places that you hadn't been yet.
Right.
And I just remember hearing Jay Z saying, um, blame Oliver North and Iran Contra. And I just never forgot, I never forgot the line. I
Mm-hmm.
just never knew what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
the first time I ever heard something similar to that. And of
Mm-hmm.
course I remember like learning about the Iran Contra
Mm-hmm.
scandal growing up in school, but it was kind of like a little footnote, like a little tiny
Oh yeah.
thing in
Oh yeah.
social studies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
I
didn't
grew.
really ever know what it meant. And they always gloss over it. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that happened. And
Yeah.
then we move on. Like, what?
Yeah. And little do we know is like actually that was such a huge major world event that probably literally why we are where we are is in direct correlation between the Iran Contra affair.
Exactly. And this show kind of like the cool thing about this show is it's clearly somebody's desire to tell that story, but dramatize it in a way that's entertaining. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
preaching about it. It's not like a historical drama where we're like, oh, it's a biopic about this person's life and we're learning about it. And
Right.
wow, we're this is, it's a decision for you to come away from it saying, wow, that was actually really interesting and insightful, or to say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, let me look this up and see if this actually happened. Okay, that didn't happen
Right.
quite like that, but the results are similar.
Right. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think my first, I didn't watch the show, but I read the pilot because I actually auditioned for Alejandro,
Mm.
which is fucking hilarious because like but that was back in the day when like Afro Latinos was not a thing in Hollywood. And so like and so
Hilarious.
they were just like, "Oh, he's got a vaguely Latin last name.
Last name.
Let's have him audition for clearly a white Colombian
Yeah.
man."
Right. That's interesting.
um
uh yeah, so is that your relationship to the show completely? What else do you have? Do you were you aware? What is your relationship to Snowfall?
Of course, I mean, of course, I was aware of it. I mean, being a black person of a certain age, um,
Every black person knew about Snowfall.
everybody knew about Snowfall. Um, and then also, watching the lead's kind of career, Damson Idris's career, kind of like you know blooming and bludgeoning. Bludgeoning, that's not the right word. Blooming, well, maybe bludgeoning. Depending on what he does. It's been so that's pretty much like all my real kind of like experience with the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it was kind of, I feel like I got not late to the show, but I kind of got in after maybe halfway through the first season. But
Mm-hmm.
there's certainly some I was interested in, but I definitely got into, I told you this show has weird footnotes that I won't forget where me and my wife got into it
Mm-hmm.
right before I left for deployment,
Mm-hmm.
and then she actually, when we were watching it years later, we were watching it when her water broke. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like those weird things you just won't forget. So it's kind of like that show. Two of the is weirdly the show that we started watching together on Sundays was Power, and then the
Mm-hmm.
show that like broke through when the or was happening right when our baby busted through was Snowfall. But anyway, yeah. So I just have a lot of affection. I think my son's birthday was soon too. Was recent too. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe all
Mm-hmm.
these little memories start bringing that back. So shout out to Isaiah.
That's lovely.
Shout
That's
out to my
lovely.
family. This show is connected to that to
Look
me
at
in that
that.
way.
Look at that snowfall. Bringing black families together.
Right. Snowfall, cocaine, bringing black families together. Yeah. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed watching this pilot too. It reminded me of a kind of style that we haven't really seen in a while. It's
Mhm.
pretty easy to follow because
Yeah.
it had a very kind of novelistic style in terms of
Hmm.
uh signaling who your main characters were pretty simply, and
Hmm.
then basically bouncing around to their different stories. And
Hmm.
each one of their stories were pretty interesting. um it's really hard for me since I watched the entire series. I
Hmm.
can remember the last frame of the show.
Hmm.
So knowing what happens, it's incredibly tragic. This is the definition of a tragedy. I don't know if you
Hmm.
know what happens at the end, but it's pretty freaking terrible.
I got a feeling based on like how the because I also read the pilot recently, so I
Yeah.
got a feeling based on like how we start off in the teaser, how this thing is gonna end. Um, and so I have a strong sense. I think like this image behind me for those who are watching on YouTube, the
Yeah.
image behind me of Compton Street in its sunshine and people are playing and chasing after an ice cream truck. I think that there's going to be a little bit of a parallel juxtaposition between that image for the
You
final
think?
shot.
Yeah. I mean, this opening shot, not to jump too much ahead, but the opening shot there that you're referring to, which if you're watching on YouTube, you will see behind Elijah, is like it's an iconic California shot. I mean, it's been
Mm-hmm.
in many, many, many TV shows. Made probably iconic by shows like Boys in the Hood and like probably this specific. Even the ice cream truck is very, very much Friday, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Big Worm, but it's even different than the Friday scene that you see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Friday takes place about 10 years after this, a little bit more than 10 years after
Mm-hmm.
this. And you see it's even different than it was then, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
see this beautiful neighborhood. It's beautiful,
Right.
sunny, damn near verdant, and
It's picturesque in a lot of ways. Yeah.
picturesque. And I mean, it's a family neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and
Very
there's
American dream.
yeah.
Very yeah. It's like just a beautiful sub. Like if we were to remove the cultural connotations and our own kind of signifiers and symbolisms of like what Compton was in like the 90s and late 80s, this could have been any 1950s 1960s like American dream, like
Mm-hmm.
uh yeah, so white picket fence, 2.5 kids, dogs, kids playing in the street,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, this is what my dad drove me through. Side note, randomly, my dad was like, "Hey, let me show you where I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and these neighborhoods." And I can like my brain kind of like took me back in time, and I'm like, "This was probably a really not that it was a bad neighborhood now, but it was like
Hmm.
this is when these houses were new and those trees were young." I could,
Hmm.
and my dad tells me stories about riding his bike just like these kids did. I
Hmm.
could see it just like a lot of these black neighborhoods were like that, you know.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, it was interesting that they opened the shot that way. And yeah, if you are following the way TV shows go, usually there's something called a bookend.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when they open this way, they usually close this way, and
Mm-hmm.
typically it's not exactly the same.
So yeah, something has to change. And if we're gonna start with everything being nice and serene and perfect, then the obvious change is things will go south.
Yeah, it makes me kind of want to watch the last episode again since I did watch all of it. But yeah, I do encourage you to watch the show. It's really, really fun, really good, great, one of my favorites. But
Nice.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, let's jump into it. Got into the relationship. I want to know, do you have a pitch?
I'm gonna push it on you to do
Okay.
the pitch.
Yeah.
Because in your text message you were very specific about how you wanted the pitch. So now let me see.
No, I'll say, look. So you know what I wanted to do, because I remember like we talked about this in the show before, where we were like, "This is not the way that you should pitch a show," right? Which I was like, "Okay, that's true. This is really not the way you should pitch a show." It was more kind of a fun thing, but I was like, you know what? Maybe I should try to take the practice a little bit more seriously. And again, with when you have like when you're pitching, a lot of times you're gonna get like a half an hour, right? So this isn't a real pitch. This is more like a, hey, if I'm sharing this with a buddy or a friend or somebody who might be in the industry real quick, and just be, if they asked, like, what's the things that might get you hooked in? What's the things that might make you interested? So I will start. I will do a pitch.
Okay.
And so with that said, cue the music.
Cue the music.
All right. So I have I don't know what your name is. I guess you're the executive at Fox or FX, whichever of the
Let's
subsidiaries, or we
just
just
make me Bob Iger because at this point
Bob
he
Iger.
owned
True.
he owned FX,
He
so
bought it all.
he
So
bought
there's that.
everything.
Hey Bob. Hey Bob. I know it'd be very strange for me to be pitching directly to you, but since I have you
Since I have you here in this elevator.
here. Right. All right. So I have this show. Okay. Um, First of all, let me talk about attachments. I have John Singleton attached. Okay. I pitched this
That's good.
idea to him. He likes it and he wants to write the pilot with
Oh,
me. Okay.
okay.
All right, so there's that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a California-based show, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's good. We can shoot it out there in LA, which is already going to save us a little bit of money
Mm-hmm.
potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the show. This is the pitch. Uh, so there was a conspiracy theory at one point in the black community that crack was started in the 80s by the CIA. This was something that just like was permeating black barbershops all over the country, but it was never 100% confirmed, right? We were hearing it in black music, all these different things, even like Marvin Gaye's What's Going On even suggested in some ways, right? It is permeating the black kind of cultural zeitgeist, especially in arts and music. But this actually turned out to be pretty true. So the once conspiracy theory in the black community turned out to be a well-known fact due to some unclassified documents in recent years. What me and John Singleton have done is created a dramatized version of it. It's the origin story of how crack got into the black community, but told at three levels. The street level, with a young black man who's just trying to make it in America, realizing that doing it the straight and narrow path is not built for him. The CIA angle, and also the rich coke dealers angle, and how all of them are intertwined. What do you say?
Wow, you lost me on Black Barbershop because I've never stepped foot in one. However, because you have John Singleton attached and I am aware of his work, I will greenlight this show and
That sounds amazing.
we're gonna put it on FX so that way we can show butts, but no frontal nudity.
Do butts, we can do cocaine, we can say the F word sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, all these great things. Thank you, thank you. So yeah, that's my pitch. That's my pitch.
That's actually a pretty good pitch. I liked it.
Yeah, I thought about it this time. Didn't go off the dome like I usually do.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. We had to do it. We had to try it. Try to put some time into it this time. You feel me?
I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah. So I
Before
mean, yeah,
before
for that one, like for me, I'm like really trying to, I guess like what they say is like, okay, who when you're trying to pitch a show is like who you got attached,
Mhm.
who's gonna be the, well, that's super important. Like what producer do you have attached? What big
Mm-hmm.
name do you have attached? Do you have an actor? So all this
Mm-hmm.
work you have to do, like not only to this is probably from more of a young producer's standpoint, but sometimes with a somebody who wrote a pilot too. So like a producer gets their hand on a pilot, that pilot gets into the right hands, then you try to leverage those things when you do that pitch.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I threw those names in there.
And they're pretty strong names. That actually is a good segue into our background, so we can break down who actually was like doing this pilot.
Yeah, yeah. What
Uh,
you got?
so it's the title of the pilot is Pilot. It's a show run by Dave Audron. And Dave Audron is known for Justified and Justified City Primeval, and also a show called Past Life back in 2010. It's directed by Adele L. Aubrey and Bial Falala, which is also they're known for Moon Knight. We have the pilot's written by Dave Adon, as well as John Singleton, who created the show, and Eric Almondo. And it is starring Damson Idris, Carter Hudson, Amelia Rios, Sergio Perez Machata, uh, um, Michelle Hyatt, Amon Joseph, and Angela Lewis. Oh, and Juan Javier Cardenas, and as well as Isaiah John. And
Yes.
it was released July 5th, 2017.
Yeah. I was actually speaking of that date. So like they do drop a date at the very opening of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I try to look into the significance. I actually think there's no significance, which makes me wonder why they
Why they were
put
so specific? Because it was like
yeah,
a
like
very specific date.
yeah, it was like June 14th, 1983. And I'm like, okay, what happened on that day?
Nothing.
I don't think anything happened. I think somebody said it was like flag. I looked at it, it was like Flag Day in '83. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but anyway.
I think specifically it's the summertime. I think
Yeah,
that's why it said it. I don't know why they didn't just say like summer 1983, why specifically June.
yeah.
But I think the idea is like, okay, summertime in Los Angeles, it's hot. It's also like Los Angeles is also considered a city of paradise. So people are in flux there to like party and have a good time. But the pressure cooker is kind of like starting to heat up and cook because of the literal heat and also the political heat that's kind of happening around. Um, that is my guess.
No, that sounds about right. And that's the do the right thing.
Yeah,
And the hottest day of the summer is when all these things happen.
things
It was
pop off. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think they were kind of trying to, which would have been driven home more by like you said, a summer title screen instead of
Mm-hmm.
a June 14th, but whatever. But yeah, let's talk about the opening of the show. You talked a little bit about it,
Mm-hmm.
this very picturesque opening with the kids playing, the people walking, everybody feels incredibly safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's a moment that happens here which informs something about who our main character will be or will turn out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it to be interesting because I did not remember this happening, and I definitely didn't flag it when I saw it the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I say the first time, not this time around, but when I watched it in real time when it was out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so like we see Big Worm pulling up in his ice cream truck, selling ice cream to all the kids. But Franklin pulls up and the kids like steal some like what does it look like? Some like
Candy.
cupcakes, candy or
Yeah,
something. They
something
look
like
like they're
that.
wrapped up in saran wrap. I'm like, this dude, did he like who made that? Anyway, so the kids pull those away and run away, and then Frank stops him. He like grabs
Mm-hmm.
him, and then his buddies are like, Magnum PI looking ass nigga, like you a cop now. You over here like a neighborhood watch guy. He's like, no, these kids need to understand how the world works. It don't work that
Mm-hmm.
way. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay. What does that say? So how did that hit you? Like how did that opening hit you? What did it tell you
Well,
about this character?
he specifically says this is how America works, which I think is
This
very
is
important.
America's, yeah.
And I think this show is in constant not to talk about my politics again, but this show is in constant conversation with like capitalism,
Yeah.
and the way that capitalism worked in the 80s and how like just like rambunctious and like run amok capitalism in the 80s was, which then puts everybody at this period of like some of our characters that we have are very desperate, and some of our characters like Franklin, who lives a very great life, is also feeling just the pressure of like having to find some sort of quote unquote success and nothing ever being enough. What it also does is like So in the pilot that's written, at least online, we actually have us super far in the future, and Franklin is already a well-established drug lord. And what he establishes there is he's actually paying for the ice cream of all the kids that are coming around, and he's actually kind of brutal with it. Um, and so that's him in the future, and then we like jump to the past. What I love about this actually is that this whole pilot feels like it's doing the job of setting up the fact that like Franklin should be on paper just a well-to-do, very good kid. You know what I mean? Like he's clearly liked in his community. He clearly has morals or ethics. Now, when he mentions that line, those ethics, then we start getting the hint that those ethics may be a little skewed or maybe a little corrupted or maybe a little off. But because he does this thing where he like takes the stolen candy and gives it back to the entrepreneur in the neighborhood and reprimands the kids, we as American watchers are like, oh, this seems like he's a pretty good, he's a good kid. um and it also establishes that the neighborhood that it establishes that the neighborhood that he's in is going to be counter to the tropes of this story, of this kind of story. So we're usually think of like Compton as it's going to be like gritty and violent and like full of like uh full of mayhem, and it's a dangerous place to live. But this is
Mm-hmm.
actually very counter. It's actually very like picturesque. It's very safe. You know what I mean? Everyone seems very happy and very content with their lives. And so that really puts us at a place of like, okay, this is the world that we're in, and the world that we're in is actually not that bad. So what is the journey that we're going to go on? What are we going to see? How is this world going to shift and change
Yeah.
based on the actions of our main character? You know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think all that you said, and I think it also it there's a suggestion again because everybody has an idea about what South what South Central LA is,
Mm-hmm.
what it became, maybe not what it is now, but certainly our like I said, our introduction to it is music and movies.
Right.
And there's a stereotype there. So again, this does break the stereotype, but it also suggests, okay, what like basically it says something like this: before this happened,
Mm-hmm.
before all these things that you're going to see happen, this was a place of community. This is a
Right.
place where people felt safe. This is not a place where, and also there's a suggestion, not to get into my politics or things all the way 100% related to race, but this is what this podcast can be too. um but it's like there's this idea about who black people are and how black people are like
Mm-hmm.
by their nature, and
Mm-hmm.
this is running counter to that too, and that
Right.
that that it doesn't it shows like black people are not the stereotype that conditions set themselves up for them to
Right.
become those stereotypes in ways, and in a lot of ways
Right.
there's still, even in that, even with those conditions, they're still more complicated than those stereotypes would suggest. So like
Right.
showing that scene does a lot. I think is doing a whole lot.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And almost everything that we see with around Franklin as he like moves around his community later on in the episode, all like basically you is used to like shake those tropes and those like racial stereotypes that we have for black people on screen,
Mm-hmm.
to the fact of like what kind of uh what kind of friends he has, what his mother does for a living, you know what I mean? Like what his relationship is to his uncle, his relationships to his aunt, like all of these things all kind of shift our initial like instincts and our uh uh initial like what's the word I'm thinking of, uh our initial like understanding of what kind of story this is going to tell, which then is going to make Franklin's ultimate, corruption and Franklin's ultimate fall from grace that much more like devastating. You know what I mean? Because like in all intents and purposes, like Franklin should actually probably be, a really upstanding human being. And also like the show does very little, and usually what ends up happening with this is like Franklin could have been a good guy, but society around him made him into the bad guy that he is. You know what I mean? He couldn't escape the hood. or he couldn't like, the cops keep fucking with him, or like this, that, and the third. But in fact, like Franklin was able to escape the hood. Franklin's very smart. Franklin could have gone to college. Franklin did all these things, and he is actually actively making a choice to not do those things, to sell weed, you know.
But the irony of that also is that the reason why he does make these decisions to be and those decisions lead to him becoming that person that we will see him as is because he went to college. Is because he took the
Mm,
straight and narrow path. Is
mm,
because he went into these spaces and felt like an outsider, or like
mm-hmm,
he said, a mascot, and he saw how the world works, so to speak, right? So like when he
mm-hmm,
when he comes back to the hood and he's telling these kids, like he's taking this from his kids, this is post. I just went to college. Post.
mm-hmm,
I've been embedded into this world that's outside of the neighborhood that I grew up in, and
mm-hmm,
he's operating with an understanding of what he believes the way the world works that his community doesn't understand. So
mm-hmm,
this is why he makes these decisions to do these
mm-hmm,
things, because he what it feels like to me is that essentially he feels like, and I actually identify, the reason why I think I identify with these things is like I feel very similarly in a lot of ways. Is like the instant every time he connects himself to an institution, that institution fails him, right?
mm-hmm,
He went to this college institution. It failed him. It told him
mm-hmm,
that he's smart and he's smarter than a lot of his peers, maybe, but you're not going to get ahead because of this, because of that. And we're only going to look at you like this and like that,
mm-hmm.
right? No matter how smart you are, no matter how many of your teachers like you, like his friend told him, right? And so I think that's the really interesting thing about this show and this pilot and this character is like, it's like you said, it's usually like the cops keep on messing with you. That's why I
Mm-hmm.
went into this, or I couldn't resist the drug games. Like, no, no, he actually had every opportunity to resist the drug game. The reason why he does it is because he's gone out and done the thing everybody says a young black man should, is go to college and become a good, upstanding person. He's like, I went out there, I saw that bullshit, and it's not set up for me.
Yeah, and I think like so that whole thing about the him and the institution failing him, we don't, unless I missed something, we don't really get that as much in the pilot, you know.
Well, he
Well,
does. I mean, he talks like everybody says, like, didn't you man, why don't you go back to college? Like,
mm-hmm.
oh, I went out there. He says all he says it to his buddies, like, and remember his that white boy he goes out to the rich side with, it was his classmate.
Yeah, yeah, no,
You know,
I understand that, but the idea
yeah.
that like the institution was saying to him that he can't be successful is we don't get that from the pilot, unless I,
Yeah.
you
No,
know what I mean?
yeah, I think I don't think that it says specifically like he's not going to be he can't be successful,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt like his basically, and again, like we're dealing with this character is a little bit complex too, is like he could have gone there and said, yeah, it's not set up for me, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna ride it out, I'm gonna push through it.
Right, right.
But he saw that and said like, man, he had more of an entrepreneurial idea, thought process around it, and was like,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't take it didn't take long basically for him to be like, or it didn't take a hard push off the ledge. You know what I'm saying? He was already like his uncle Leon was already selling weed. Like he was
Right,
already connected to these different places that will make it easier for him to do it. But it's
right,
like it's almost like he went to college to just grab some knowledge, like just enough knowledge to come back. He even says that about like working his little $3 an hour job. Is like, I'm getting paid to learn how to run a business.
right, right, right. The ambition that Franklin has is all very clear, you know, like the ambition that he has, his love of money is also very clear. His desire to elevate himself out of a certain station, you know. But from my watch of the pilot, I didn't get the sense um that he was coveting the affluence that he had experienced until the very that last shot of him in the car and him looking at the money. So everything up until that point, like he doesn't drink, he doesn't partake in all the partying stuff. He had that, kind of like awkward beat with his friend where he's like, you taking me along to this coke deal because I'm black, right? And then he kind of makes a joke out of it, you know. But he's not really engaged with the porn stars. Like he isn't like flirting with them. He isn't. He's just like he's very much like business centered and business oriented. So there was no understand even, and then even when he's like with his homies, he seems like that much more like relaxed, and he's like flirting with that girl at the convenience store, and he's dancing, he's doing all these little things. So I didn't really quite feel that drive, that pull, until he is meeting with the Israeli drug lord, and then he suddenly is like, I will flip that for you, because he sees an opportunity. And then when he finally gets the money from flipping the cocaine, the way that he's looking at the money, it is like, oh wow, this kid actually, there's something off about him. There's something not quite right, because I don't know anyone who looks at money the way that you probably looked at Isaiah when Isaiah was born. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Frank Saint. He when he looks at the money, it's like I said, there's the beautiful thing about crime. This is why I love American crime as a
mm-hmm,
vehicle, as a vehicle for drama. Is like there's always so many opportunities to leave,
mm-hmm.
and there's always really good reasons not to do something.
Yes, yes,
And there's
yes,
also really good reasons to do it, but
yes,
they always come with incredible consequence.
yes, yes.
And
This is
so, yeah,
yes. This is what I really love about this show, is the fact that like these are all he's making, until I guess until later on in the season that we get a little bit more of his backstory, but it seems like he is making conscious decisions to corrupt himself. You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's giving like Goodfellas, like the way that Goodfellas was like he had constant opportunities in Goodfellas to like get off this train and save himself and save his family, but he was just every step of the way more and more and more desiring that money, that prestige, that thing that like, that the mafia was giving him. And Franklin seems to be very much the same way, you know.
yeah, yeah. He gets, and he is an opportunity seeker.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like his superpower is his ambition, but it's
His
also
ambition,
his
yeah.
ability to see how quickly a window of opportunity can close, right?
Yes. Yep.
Like he knows, like when it opens, he walks straight through it, like
Mm-hmm.
immediately, of course, because
Without
that's what an
thought.
ambitious person does. But he
Yeah.
also knows how fast the window can close for him
Mm-hmm.
and takes advantage of it before it closes. And that's the thing that it seems like he displays in the show. But yeah, like like I said, what we were talking about, the novelistic aspect of the show, which
Mm-hmm.
makes the three stories pretty super easy to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well talk about the other characters. I
Yep.
mean, and the openings, their openings as well. So I really love the way they opened also Gustavo's character as essentially like he's just a giant luchador. He
Mm-hmm.
literally jumps into the ring, and then we also connected them to Frank, and it shows
Mm-hmm.
like Frank is into Mexican wrestling as well.
Mm-hmm.
Also seems like a very LA thing, something that I never seen or experienced.
I I every time I'm in LA, nobody's taking me to a luchador match, and that kind of
Did it
pisses me
feel
off.
oh that you
I,
haven't been?
I'm a little pissed. I'm like, if this is a thing where y'all just like watch luchadors in like warehouses, then yo, take me.
Right, that seems pretty awesome. Not gonna lie.
That seems like fun.
Yeah, his buddies go in there to like they're enjoying it. They're betting on stuff. And it seems like Frank is like a real big fan of this guy also,
Mm-hmm.
which is cool. Like a cool way to connect them, but you don't know how
Sure.
they're gonna find themselves in the show, which is
Mm-hmm.
great because spoiler alert, they end up everybody pretty much ends up being connected in a
Mm-hmm.
super
Oh yeah.
like like
Yeah.
as friends or colleagues or partners or villains of each other. Um, but so we get that opening with Oso, and at the very same time, after the match that he loses, he ends up connecting with some people outside in the alleyway, of course, because this is American crime. And
Because that's what crime happens in TV shows, in an alley.
right. Frank runs up, gets an autograph from him. Cool little moment there. But he also just we find out what what his story might end up being, which is
Right.
essentially he was a bag man, he was a muscle, and now he's getting like a new task, a more risky task, and then he's given an opportunity to uh do it or not do it
Mhm.
and make some other decisions too. What I found fascinating about this guy also is that I don't think he says a word.
He says very little. I think he kind of grunts a yes when Franklin's like, "Can I get an autograph?"
Mm-hmm.
And then he says like a
Like at the
couple of
bar, I think he might say like one or two
yeah,
words.
yeah, he says like a couple of things like, "Yeah, I'll do it" or something like that. But yeah, he's like very much like stoic, very quiet, you know what I mean? There is like those he does have lingering looks towards Lucia. So
Yeah,
there is some sort of like, attraction there, but for the most part he's just like very like tunnel vision in terms of what he wants. Um we
yeah.
do get that lovely scene where he's like looking at the picture, which I think is like which says so much about his what his motivation is.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why like TV is a visual medium.
Right.
Yay. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, and if you're looking down at your phone, you'll blink and you'll miss that moment. Like
Right.
it's, so that I really, really loved about him.
And I think another thing, because I was like, I don't think I'd ever seen a character who had an entire story, whether
Uh-huh.
A, B, or C, an entire story where they don't say much at
But they
all.
don't say
Like
shit.
they
Yeah.
say maybe 10 words, like
Yeah.
total. And so like I was like, okay, so what are we meant to learn? So I thinking about that in his story, um, there's one thing that he does that's incredibly active or dynamic really when he has
Mm-hmm.
that fight scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that fight scene, we know he's a big guy and he can fight because he's a Mexican wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
But in that fight scene where he got caught, he's doing the burglary, he gets caught, and the guy starts fighting him. The guy is a pretty capable fighter, by the way. But
Yeah.
I don't know if he's security or just a regular guy, but he's pretty damn good at fighting. He held his own against Oso, but it seemed like when Oso lost control really and used his real brute strength is when he
Mm-hmm.
ends up killing the guy. And it's
Right.
clearly an accident. Like I don't think he meant to kill anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was like, okay, maybe this is what is meant to be known about this character. If he doesn't say and do much other than just
Mm-hmm.
kind of follow orders, maybe what we are meant to learn about Oso is that when his superpower is his brute strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when he uses it, it ends up failing him in some way and causing him to
Yeah.
actually have to find himself out of another thing. So like whenever he uses his brute strength, accidents happen, which
Yes.
causes him to spiral into more
Yes.
stories, you know?
Yeah. And like in him, like Franklin and also like our third character, all are because they're all ambitious, they can all see it. They all have a third sense for opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And so like he has that third sense of opportunity that he then takes advantage of. Which then kind of leads him down this path. He Gustavo seems to be the only one who is vaguely conflicted, like he hesitates.
Yeah.
So there is a sense that like whatever is holding him back, maybe that's the same thing that kind of holds him back from using his full strength until he
Yeah.
gets angry enough to do it.
Yeah.
So there is that feeling that something is like pulling him back or keeping him from really, really diving in, but his sheer like self control to drive himself forward is the thing that's like pushing him past whatever in his soul is telling him, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. I really like that read on his character too, because it even is suggested in his line of work, like his above
Mm-hmm.
ground line of work, right? He wears a mask
Yep.
and he's told to not use his strength all the way, you
Right.
know.
Right. Right.
That's all he does is not fully use it. Like he's
Right.
pulling punches,
Right.
he's throwing people and dropping them in ways that's gonna make sure that they're still safe.
Right.
And outside of that, he's also asked to do that, and then when he loses control, bad
Right.
things happen.
Bad things happen. Yeah.
And again, even wearing the mask, like another thing about this show is it's a double life drama,
Mm.
right? Each of
Mm-hmm.
the characters, especially these three, each of the characters are wearing a mask in some kind of way. They
Mm-hmm.
have an above ground life and they have a underground life,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they're all being set up in this really interesting way. And those two lives are in conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and they're set up in really interesting ways. So I really like watching this show because it again it's easy to follow, but there are
Mm-hmm.
layers there to watch,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that keep you that kind of bring it up to that level of like prestige drama.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And it's also what they're doing is very difficult because it's, it's three separate stories that are intertwined, but right now, with the exception of like Gustavo and Franklin, they don't really intersect. However,
Hmm.
the actions that they're doing are having an effect on the people that are around them,
Hmm.
and so the pacing is incredible
Hmm.
in this show. Like I remarked on that. I was like watching, I was like, wow, we are moving. Like we
Moving.
are like boom, 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 boom. There's only like
And it doesn't
one.
feel like a slog at all. It's an hour.
No, no, it's an hour. It's a quick hour. We don't get any real like exposition dumps until like almost halfway,
Yeah.
and they earn it at that point because we at that point we have so many questions that you kind of need that exposition dump. Um, and it's from two characters that it would make sense that they would say the things that they're saying. So like, it is a well written, well constructed pilot. Like this is incredibly difficult what they're doing
Yeah,
with this.
it's a very it kind of in a way it reminds me a little bit as we say this. It just popped into my head, but it reminds me of Billions a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
The way
billions.
that it's structured.
Yeah. Or
But yeah,
like
yeah,
or like The Wire, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
for
But
sure.
even then, like I was trying to think back of the pilot of The Wire. Were we dealing with like three different I think we were dealing no, I think we were dealing with like two and a half stories by this point in The Wire. You
By
know
the
what I
way, we
mean?
need to do the Wire too.
We do need to do The
Why have we
Wire.
not done the Wire?
Because it's one of those epic ones.
It's epic and it's slow. That pilot
It's
is
fucking
slow, if I remember.
the whole first half of the first season is very slow.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll do it one day. We'll do it one day. But you know what this show reminded me of? Speaking of shows that reminded me of other shows,
uh,
um, reminded me of Breaking Bad. Okay, I had to throw it in. I had to find a way. It
it is
wasn't the
take
best way to shoehorn that in there, but I put it
we
in there
have
somewhere.
been we ha- it has been 5 episodes before we have mentioned Breaking
I
Bad.
know, and I realized like Franklin Saint and Walter White have similarities for sure. They do have
Yeah,
similarities
absolutely.
in their journey and what ends up happening to them
Yes.
in the end.
Yes,
Um,
I agree with that. The difference is and that's the thing about this show that I find so fascinating is the difference is like Walter is down and out, you know what I mean? And so like
yeah,
when he then decides to start selling drugs, initially it kind of makes sense, you know.
right,
Franklin's not. And
yeah,
he's not. I mean, like you have that thing with his dad, so there's clearly some pain, there, and a lot of desire not to end up like his father.
hmm,
You know what I mean? But his mom's not struggling. You know what
no,
I'm saying? Like he is also he looks like he, doesn't want for nothing, and he's constantly told like you don't have to, you didn't have to,
you
you
don't
can
have to
come
do
out and
this,
party. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. And
right?
yet
Why are you
and
doing this?
why are you doing this?
Right? No, I mean, I think the wonderful thing about the comparison to these two as well is like that part of the drama is, I mean, you can't extricate the race element, right? The
Yes.
reason why it's important that Walter White is down and out is because he's a white guy who's down and
Yes.
out who needs to sell drugs, which is something that you usually wouldn't have to do as a white man, right?
Right.
And Franklin Saint is a black man who's not down and out, which is another like a stereotype. Oh, yeah, if you're black and you start a show, you got to be down and out
hmm
for you to want to do this.
Right.
So it's just interesting that those two, the
Right.
juxtaposition of those two things.
Well, he's if we're looking at societal, he's stuck. You know what I mean? Like, yes, this place is picturesque. Yes, in all intents and purposes, this should be something that we want. But he's a young man, and he's hanging out with people that are partying and have beautiful mansions and a bunch of things. And the only thing that he can, because he knows, like, if I'm in college, what am I gonna do? I'm never gonna get to this point.
No,
So the only thing I can do in order to get what they have is to sell drugs because that seems to be the the quickest and the most amount of money that I can get
yeah,
doing
and the
this.
one
Yeah.
that I'm gonna be accepted, like not
Right.
accepted, but like basically, it's like that world is not gonna accept me to the
Right.
point where I'm gonna get this that fast. Like I
Right.
want to live like this now. I've been out into the world. Like this is beautiful. I love this street, but I've been out into the world and it gets way better.
Feels way better.
And I have not even shown my friends this. They don't even know. So like I feel like the golden child, really. Like
hmm
none of his friends even know that this exists out there
Right.
and that
Right.
it's accessible. But he
Right. It's
feels
also
like it's accessible.
that brings up a moment when on the bus. because like we talk about the difference between Franklin and his friends. And on the bus, his friend is like playing music, and then he's asked to turn the music down. And he turns up, he gets into this thing with this white guy, and Franklin kind of moves away from his friend. And you can see the fact that like Franklin understands the rules of the white world for lack of
Right.
lack of all intents and purposes, and his friends don't. And instead of him like really like reprimanding his friend or really like taking trying to teach his friend the right way to go about it, he actually removes himself and separates himself from his friend and tries to get as much distance as he can from his friend, which I think is an
Right.
apt metaphor for what Franklin is trying to do just throughout his entire life. He is trying to get as much distance from his home, even though he keeps saying, it's like the lies you tell yourself. He
Hmm.
keeps saying like, I'm back home because this is home. This ain't this ain't it. This is like, but he keeps going back to where the white folks are. He keeps like going to where the rich neighborhood is. He keeps like moving out. He keeps going back, even though he keeps telling himself like, actually, this is home. These are my people. This is that and the third.
Yeah, yeah, and that made me think about why, because I was actually wondering. I think you just actually made it clear for me,
Mm-hmm.
why he would go. Well, I get why you're going back, but why
Mm-hmm.
would you end up doing that favor for the white guy? Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
my girl's got that was the one thing I was confused about. I was like, hey, my girl likes this coat. Can you go get it for me? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm the black guy. I'll always be the black guy. I'll do it. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you go do that? But it's like it's because he realizes that his is really it's like he realized the window of opportunity for him to continue living his life is beginning to close. And if he
Yeah.
does, and as long as he is providing for these
Yes.
people,
Yeah.
then they will invite them into their space. When
Right.
that runs out, when his value runs out, then they will
Right.
not.
And they will
And
not.
that's why he
Right.
did it.
Right. And exactly. And he's also realizing the limitations of the product that he's selling. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Of weed.
he's look of weed. He's
Weed can
looking
only go
around.
so far.
It
Yeah.
can only go so far. He's looking around. He's seeing all these like folks who are now like jumping onto another drug, and it seems like this drug is like that much more better. And eventually, they're gonna start calling him to be the weed man. However, if he can like capitalize on this new thing, then he'll still be, like you said, useful to these people and still be invited back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Into this world. You know?
Yeah. So let's talk about Teddy too. We're
Yeah, Teddy.
he,
Teddy's a
he's
fuck.
okay. I love this. All right. So
Well,
we were,
just because he works for the CIA, and I just know the direction that he's going. So I'm like,
bro,
Teddy,
it gets bad, bro. It gets real bad with
I can
Teddy.
imagine.
But yeah. So
I can
what's
imagine.
your read on Teddy? What's your feelings like? Talk about his opening a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit. Like,
We
see,
can't we can't talk about Teddy without talking about Alejandro.
oh yeah,
And we have to compare it to like the bookend of Alejandro's scene in which his homie had ODs because he
yeah.
gets cocaine blown up his ass. Um, which I didn't know was a thing, but I guess it is.
Not either.
um, so, but we see Alejandro in a very like beautiful apartment, beautiful mansion, this, that, and the third. And then
Right.
when we cut to Teddy, Teddy is like in once again, also like similar to Gustavo, down and out. He's in like
Hmm.
this really shitty ass apartment. He like eats by himself. He then he wears a very schleppy suit. His hair is disheveled. He's got like a weird 5 o'clock shadow, you know what I mean? And he like schleps his way over to his job. And when he's at his job, he's like trying to call his somebody. We find out later that this is his baby mama, that he's trying to get a hold of and call, but he's like trying to call somebody and he leaves a message.
Hmm.
Um, little do we know that this whole thing is a front and he's actually a secret CIA operative. And when Alejandro shows up, Alejandro's like, "You're the guy who can get stuff done." And this unassuming white guy, we're like, "Oh shit, he actually is more of a badass than I would have given him credit."
Yeah, yeah. I love that scene where the opening with Alejandro and then the way they just cut to we're not gonna they don't do a lot of exposition. It's just like Alejandro walks in. He's like, "Hey, you're the guy. You know that guy?" And he's like,
Hmm.
"How do you know that guy?" This is, he tries to be coy, and then he's like, "Listen, I don't have time for that coy bullshit. Bring your
Hmm.
gun if you need to, but just come on.
Yeah,
Need your
come on.
help."
Yeah, move your
Um,
ass.
yeah, right,
I just like move your motherfucking ass.
right. So that jumps off that story, and yeah, that was interesting. Catch too is in terms of like the two different lives that they're living there.
Hmm.
And when Teddy walks, it's interesting. Like when Teddy walks into that space and kind of sees the way that other agent was living,
Hmm.
he's like intrigued, but it doesn't seem like, to me it didn't feel like, oh, I need this life. It
No,
seems like he's almost like he
he's a
feels like that
he's
guy
like
is a perversion of what the
yeah,
job really is.
he's like annoyed. Like
Yeah,
he's like when he finds out like, oh wait, what was this guy doing? He was fucking, sex workers and doing coke and
right.
I'm over here living like this. Like it's not like he's not like, oh shit, I should have been. He's like, man, fuck this dude.
Yeah,
Like,
he's like, this
you know.
dude was, he's like, I can't believe I can't believe that this is what this guy was getting paid to do while I was sitting.
Hmm.
It's not about like, again, it's not him being excited about the life he should have had. It's just like,
Hmm.
this is a perversion of the job, but it's also in a similar way to what Frank felt like when he went to college and came
Hmm.
back. It's like it's like Teddy goes off into the world outside of his little cubicle
Right.
and goes and sees like what the real CIA is doing. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like this is what they're doing. Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I got placed basically on house arrest, and y'all put me in this little room because of something I've done that we haven't been fully made aware of at this point in the pilot. But so in order for me to get to the place where I was, I'm gonna have to embed myself into this world,
Right. Right.
and then master it.
I think it's very important too that all these characters are young.
Yeah,
Uh, Teddy has a line where he's like, "I'm 28,"
yeah,
and then as soon as he says, "I'm 28," I go, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." Franklin is like what 21, 22, and
21,
Gustavo's like
22.
31, 32. It's
Yeah.
important that all these people are young, because I think that like one that fuels their ambition, they feel
Mm-hmm.
like they still feel like they can conquer the world.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But it's all interesting because they're all at different places in that time place. Like at 28, you're approaching 29, you're looking at 30, and you're like, oh shit, I haven't conquered the world yet. Now's the time when I need to. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? When you're 31, 32, you've passed that hump, and now you're thinking like, okay, so my life isn't where I thought it was going to be. So then how do I make moves and shifts to make my life where it is? And when you're 21, 22, you got your whole life ahead of you, and you think you can be, conquer the universe.
Yep.
So I think it makes sense why all these characters make the moves that they do based on what their ages are, you know. Not just their ages. There's a lot of other factors that are factoring in, but I think just because Teddy mentions how old he is, I thought that was a very important thing to flag. You
Yeah,
know.
no, I think that's important too. And it didn't feel too out of place too. It felt like
Mm-hmm.
it did feel. It's usually when you have to state something like that, it feels weird in the show. But I think because of it being connected to his job and his career and like where he sits, it made a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah, I know we were talking about the kind of the three main characters in those stories there, but you kind of have to talk about Uncle Jerome. Uncle Jerome with
You do gotta talk
the
about
Jerry
Jerome.
curl, working out in the front yard. It's like an
Uh-huh.
image that I've seen a lot in my
Yeah.
life. It felt
Yeah.
iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was just Jerome's just an interesting character, and I think has a really interesting turn when Franklin actually presents him with that key, because
Right.
it was an unexpected refusal that
Yes.
I think that was actually really interesting and smart, and to show that he has with kind of like, well, there's a movie called Rounders where there's like one character who just does this. It's a poker movie that I really like, by the same guys that do Billions. And there's this one character that um, he does this to make a living. He doesn't make it
Mm-hmm.
to shoot to
Mm-hmm.
the world series of poker. He does it to pay the bills. John Turturro
Mm-hmm.
plays him. But in this character, it felt like Uncle Jerome is that same character. He's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
I do this to make a living, man. I don't
Right.
want to. I don't want no problems. This is gonna. Yeah, we can make a bunch of money, but this is gonna bring it to
Right.
too many issues.
Right. Right.
And then Aunt Louie, we find like Aunt Louie does it has a really great turn too because she, by all accounts, at the very beginning and the introduction of her character, could be just like falling straight into stereotype, right?
Oh yeah.
But by the end of her activity within Franklin's story, you
Mm-hmm.
find that she is much more dynamic and has so
Mm-hmm.
many more different avenues that her character can take.
Mm-hmm.
And also like they Jerome and Louis have a really kind of beautiful relationship, and she has a
Mm-hmm.
really great relationship with Frank. So it's just a
Yeah.
very just a kind of cool way to introduce side characters and embed them
Yeah.
into the plot that makes sense, and also
Yeah.
give them somewhere to go.
Well, and also like Jerome's refusal is the refusal that Franklin lacked. You know, usually with our protagonists, when they're presented with their inciting incident, there is that period in time where they refuse the inciting incident to create a little bit of tension from when you get from Act One to Act Two, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but because Franklin was like, "Nah, fuck it, I'm gonna put on this bulletproof vest. Please shoot me, Israeli man, so I can get this key," without any hesitation. We needed somebody to look him in the face and say to him, "Dude, this is a bad idea."
Right.
And the fact that it comes from Jerome, who went is coded as the guy who should be the one who's like, "Oh yeah, nigga, let's go, let's sell this key." For him to look at him and be like, "Nah, get the fuck out of my house, take that shit and get the fuck out of my house," is like very powerful and very strong. And it also gives us the hint that what Franklin's doing is actually wrong, you
Right.
know, because up until this point, we're like with Franklin. We're like, yo, kid is cool. Like he's really lovely. He's really nice. He's very polite. You know what I mean? Like he's running around. Like he just wants to make a living. He wants to make some bread. Okay, yeah, getting that key of Coke might have been something stupid, but we know he's gonna sell that. So we're like, okay, cool. Like, Franklin, he's kind of our dude. And then we finally have somebody who looks at him and is like, actually, the choices you're making are fucking stupid and the wrong choice. And stop it.
Right. From
You
his
know,
weed dealing uncle,
from
which
his
is
weed dealing
great.
really. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
not
And
his
also like
mom.
not his
Not his
mom.
friends.
No,
Yeah.
no. And also what's great too is like when we do get the turn for the aunt and when she takes him to the club, it's actually we also get a turn for the female characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yep.
like all of a sudden now, because I was gonna flag that. I was like, yeah, it feels like this is all well and cool, but like for the most part, all the women that we're seeing are essentially half naked, you know what I mean? Or they're, a matriarch,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Whose only real job within the pilot at this point, I'm sure she has more because it's very intriguing on why she has a gun and what job she's doing this and the third. But up until this point, has just been there to like show how lovely of a family that Franklin has. It's actually the aunt and then the club owner who are both women characters who then suddenly have agency and decisions that they're making that
Mm-hmm.
drive the plot and story forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're the key. Like, I don't think it's a an accident that they were the key to solving the problems
Yes.
of the guys. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And our
Yeah.
main
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's with that. Like we spent a good bit of time talking about the characters because I think they are really intriguing. But with that, we've got some more things to talk about. But let's take a break and come back with more of the episode one show covering Snowfall. And we're back with more episode
Dun,
one
dun, dun,
show.
dun, 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 dun. I got a question for you.
Yes, I have an answer.
Uh,
I was thinking about this actually. Go ahead. I think
which
I might be thinking about this.
what song from Kendrick Lamar's last album would be a needle drop for
Squabble
this
up.
show? Squawk. You didn't even think about it.
No. Okay. I actually was thinking
I
about this
was
this
thinking
morning.
Dodger Blue. I was thinking Dodger Blue. Dodger Blue could
Okay,
have
that's good.
could
That's a
could
good
have
one.
gone this there.
I was just thinking about this, and I had to really think about it as a musician and a music lover. I was like, I don't know how I feel about somebody using music, this
Mhm.
wonderful, beautiful spiritual thing, to take somebody down.
We
I had a misgivings about my excitement about that moment. Uh,
I okay. This is, and then we got to get back.
yeah, we got to get
Well,
back.
all I'm gonna say is the fact that he's still dissing that dude on the Playboy Cardi song now is giving me pause. I'm like,
Yeah, it's like music ain't really supposed to be for that, but it's
nah,
okay. It's
it's
okay.
getting a
Anyway,
little weird. It's
it
getting a
just
little
made
weird.
me think about it.
It's
I
getting a
thought
little
about
weird.
that randomly this morning. It's California connection with this show, maybe whatever. Anyway, no,
Okay,
so yeah,
one last question. One last
okay, go
question.
ahead, go ahead,
This is gonna harken back from our first season.
go ahead.
Would this show be better or worse with a Black Keys needle drop?
Oh, 100% worse. 100% worse. Has no place in
Lonely
time or
boy,
space.
lonely
Yeah,
boy when he picks up the coke.
absolutely. No, there should be no music after 83 in this show at all, if you ask me. I don't want to hear no music that came out before 1983. It should follow the timeline of the show, if you ask me. There's
Gotcha,
something
gotcha.
so specific about this show. Anyway, no, we talked a lot about these characters. We kind of missed a couple. There were like Avi, the Israeli gangster.
Mhm,
There was a mother. The mother had a really great scene with Franklin, but again, like she didn't get a lot to work with, but did
mhm,
allow us to see a couple story threads out there. So there's
mhm,
plenty of story threads, like and then the story engine for this show. I mean, it seems like pretty simple. Like what we were talking about it before, like
mhm.
crime, American crime is just a wonderful engine
Right.
for a TV show. It's pretty simple. Once crime in general, but American crime specifically because it's connection to capitalism and also just like the above ground and below ground nature just will always lend itself to a double life drama.
Oh yeah.
There's
Yeah.
always in a double life drama is just rife with drama.
Yeah.
Um,
There's an inevitable end to this, you know what I mean? Because like as we know, because we as Americans and watching American TV, we can only take so much like wanton bad until we desire some sort of like consequence to happen to the characters. So these characters are either going to go in prison or they're going to die or something. Like
mhm,
we need that. So there is a sense whether or not, and I'm saying that neither as neither right nor wrong. I'm just saying that like that seems to be the way we ingest stories.
mhm.
And so there seems to be an inevitable stop point for all three of our characters. And what we're waiting for and what we're hinging we're kind of uh deliciously watching with apprehension is what's going to end up be the consequences for the actions that they're taking, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. I mean, again, crime can spin you off into a bunch of stories until you die, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every character can find themselves spun off into a million stories until they die.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's and except the main character keeps spinning until they get to the
Mm-hmm.
very end of the series, and then what
Mm-hmm.
happens? That's the
Right.
thing. But drama, I mean, crime and murder are
Mm-hmm.
wonderful drivers of drama. It's always are, and they always will be.
It always will be. I mean, like you're like that's what Shakespeare made all 75% of his plays based on. It's
Mhm.
crime and murder.
Crime, murder, and war.
Yeah, crime, murder, war.
Um,
And oftentimes war is a umbrella for crime and murder.
yeah, I mean, war is like I had another theory. Well, not a theory. I'm not the first person to come up with it or think of it, but it's like war almost is always the umbrella over every story that you see.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a war that is a part of each story that you see,
Mm-hmm.
from Casablanca to Snowfall.
Mm-hmm.
There's a love story there. The Casablanca is a love story, but the war is looming.
Is the war's over? Okay.
Snowfall, American
Yeah.
Crime Story, war is looming. Cold War is looming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, so let's get into the ABCs of it all, man. Like I want to
Okay.
hear we've already kind of we basically just talked out the ABCs, but I want to hear yours written out. What you come
Sure.
up with. What do you have?
Yeah. So it's hard for me to say A, B, C because it feels like it gives it hierarchy to the stories. I think all the stories exist in a very kind of like parallel in terms of importance. So I'm just gonna say like this was a story, this was a story, this was a story.
Okay.
So the first story that I got was after witnessing the death of a spy, Alejandro recruits a CIA operative Teddy to flip a mountain of drugs to provide cash for US backed rebels in his home country. And then the second story I found is Gustavo is recruited for a new job that if he completes will transform him from a struggling luchador to a made man in a local crime family. And then the third story I saw was when Franklin meets a crime lord, he makes a deal with the devil. when he convinces the crime lord to loan him a kilo of cocaine in order to sell it. The drug lord gives him 24 hours. If not, Franklin will have to pay with his
Yeah.
life.
I actually disagree twice with you. Okay.
Damn it.
One, yes, yes, I disagree twice with you. So, with one thing is, I actually do think that there's a hierarchy of stories. That's
Okay.
the one. And then the second one, I would flip it from being Alejandro's to Teddy's story because I
Yeah,
felt
yeah.
like while Alejandro opened that story up,
Mm-hmm.
it Teddy was the one who was active in making decisions, you know.
Yes, yes, yes. I did that because I was watching it. You're absolutely right. I was doing that because I was watching it I was writing the story as I was watching it. So I was like, oh, yeah, here the guy goes.
Right.
Because it was also the first time within the show, besides like Gustavo's kind of like, hey man, do this thing in the alleyway. It was the
Mm-hmm.
first time that I saw somebody being like, I have a problem. Let me go solve my problem, you
Right,
know?
right, right. That's really fair. That's really fair because
Mhm.
like he does because he opens it and because he's attached to that CIA agent and that
Mhm.
agent is the one causing. You know, it's almost like really like it's almost like his story almost ends when he meets Teddy if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like when he meets Teddy and recruits him, like that's the end of a almost a
The ball
D, a
gets
small D.
the yeah, the ball gets passed off. I was thinking actually as we were talking, I was thinking like, okay, what if we didn't even start with Alejandro and we just started with Teddy, and then
Yeah.
Alejandro
And he
walks in
walks
and is
in.
like, I was curious about that too. And the only
Mm-hmm.
thing that and to be fact, the only thing that we would miss is the fact that like Alejandro killed all those women. So like he did, right?
I didn't think about it. Yes, but just because you said it, because I didn't think about that. I honestly didn't know, but I
Well, he
think you're
said
yes.
he says all this shit like there's so much blood, and Alejandro's like, don't worry about
Yeah, yeah, and he finds hair at the
it.
very end. He finds hair on the
and I
corner of that thing,
and
um,
I
that
think an
piece of
earring or
stone
something.
or something like. Yeah, he
Yeah,
finds
something
the
like
earring.
that.
No, you're right. I did not catch that. That was a good catch.
Yeah. So
Jesus, that
so
was dark.
besides that, I don't think we actually needed that scene. I mean, we kind of needed the scene for the deck. I mean, I guess that CIA agent, specifically him, is important.
Yeah, but
The guy who
you could have done without it for sure.
yeah, we
But
could
I
have
think
just
it
saw
was like
him.
attractive fantasy, crazy cocaine fueled sex shit that you have to kind
Yeah.
of embed into your
Which
show.
is very like it's so funny watching this because it's 2017
Yeah,
and
it doesn't
thinking about
happen
us,
like that no more.
it don't happen like TV don't happen like that in
No,
2025. Like where
no,
it's
and it's
just like
just an 8 hour. Sorry, not 8 hour, 8 year, eight
yeah,
years away. Like
yeah,
it's so
yeah,
interesting how fast that changes. You're right. It does
yeah,
feel like from a bygone era.
yeah. Yeah.
No, no, mine were pretty much similar though. It was like Teddy's. Mine was Teddy's story. The A for me, it was Franklin because I felt like Franklin
Mhm.
kind of like dominated. His story kind of dominated the
Yeah, he's the
show.
protagonist.
But
He's
I
the
will say like
protagonist.
Teddy is the glue. Like Teddy was the
Hmm.
glue for the show for both
Hmm.
of them. Like who is inevitably going to connect them, and you see it when they're looking
Hmm.
at documents. Avi's in there,
Hmm.
Lucia's in there,
Hmm.
and so like we know Frank is connected to Avi.
Hmm.
All these different things. You know how he's going to connect these people.
Right, right.
But I say he takes initiative to take over the dead colleagues' covert mission to fund the Contras with coke sales. That was a B story. A story for me was local, small time weed dealer Franklin gets into the cocaine business, hoping to move up into the world.
Hmm.
And then the third one was also a luchador and muscle gets an opportunity to join the crime family by pulling off a dangerous burglary.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, similar, but yeah, I just did think that there was the screen time for me was the justification for making it A.
Yeah,
In my
and Franklin is clearly the protagonist because the pilot is doing so much to establish Franklin before his inevitable like descent into crime,
yeah,
and we need all before the story that they're trying to tell. We need all of that. We need to just pack that. You know what I mean? Like more and more and more and more and more and more for the ultimate tragedy
for
to
sure,
hit. You know,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, I will ask you this: what you got for your coldest lines? There wasn't a whole lot of super cold lines in this. I really like for a show that I really enjoyed. There wasn't a lot of really cool dialogue, but What
There
did you
was
get for
amazing.
yours?
There was cool shots, cool moments, just cool pacing. I give it to there's that he has a Franklin has a speech for the whole game. His gig is rigged. The
Mm-hmm.
whole game is rigged. I think he gives that to his uncle. I think that was an awesome
Yeah.
speech. Maybe not because the lines were particularly cold, but just because like it is our hint at that Franklin is of why Franklin is doing what he's doing. Um, in comparison to everything in his life, which should tell us that he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. We realize like, oh, okay, all that shit that he's saying at the top, like actually, he doesn't believe that in his core. This is actually what he believes in his core.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great.
so that's mine.
Yeah, that's good. Mine was for this exact same reason, just a different line. Is when
Mm-hmm.
he's in there with Avi and he puts on like that was an interesting scene. I think that was a really creative scene to show
Mm-hmm.
like how far somebody's willing to go
Mm-hmm.
to get into this business, literally willing to die. And then he does
Mm-hmm.
something interesting too. This is apart from the line, but like when he says, if you stand too far, I can't aim true. But if I get closer, it's gonna hurt more. And
Yeah.
he steps forward, right?
Yeah.
Steps forward, saying signaling like I'll take the pain to you know to get into this life. But he says after that, Abby is like, or no, he says Frank says, shitty choices, and then Abby's like, welcome to the real world. So it was really though that exchange was my coldest line or my
Yeah.
coldest exchange, which
Yeah.
for is for the same reason, like these are the things that again I thought that was just a creative way to physically show what your main character is willing to do
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
to get into this life. So yeah, that's my coldest lines. But what you got for your Steph Curry award?
I give it to the cinematographer.
Oh yeah,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, I think like I don't know, there was something really like really just kind of like 90s like pulpy kind of
Mm-hmm.
like crime movie-ish
Yep.
like and maybe because it's like John Singleton's attached, so like they were really like laying into like the boys in the hood, like I was getting so much nostalgia for like the way that it was shot, the way that it was moving. So kudos to that whole team, but like I was really like brought back to like being at my cousin's house watching watching Menace to Society. You
Right.
know what
No,
I mean?
it did have the kind of like that like modern sheen on an old aesthetic, right?
hmm hmm
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, it's funny because I gave it the Steph Curry award to John Singleton, rest in
hmm
peace,
Rest in peace.
for being kind of like the filter for which all these movies and kind of
hmm
like anytime you see this imagery, it's through his lens, right?
Yep. Yep.
So just shout out to him for bringing this story to the fore, and yeah. So
Yeah.
that's my Steph Curry.
And he's my Juneteenth. I
Oh,
think
nice.
under criminally underrated.
Criminally underrated.
Uh, criminally underrated. And exceptional. Like he is his his storytelling is so idiosyncratic. And people bite off of it all the time and don't give him credit. So
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, I actually gave the Juneteenth to the show, all around. I know we don't usually give it to the show, but I felt like this show, again, because it's like the manifestation of a old black
Mm-hmm.
conspiracy theory. Like it's like 5 seasons of the origin story of a what was once a black conspiracy theory and now is confirmed.
Yeah.
Is just so brilliant to me, and so I got to give it to the show.
And the culture loves this show.
Oh yeah,
Like
it was. I
it's
mean, dude, when Uncle Jerome said the memeable moments in this show were
mm-hmm.
like infinite. When Uncle Jerome says, "Teach your boys how to squabble," I mean that video and that meme. I mean, I've seen it 1,000 times, and it's still hilarious to this day. So there's so much to go back to watch. I actually can't wait to. I kind of want to rewatch it to get to these moments, and I remember so
Mm-hmm.
much. But yeah, so actually, who is your um who is your Indiana Jones award? Do you have one?
All the white people.
All the white people?
Because here's my thing. I think that race is very specific in this show.
Yeah.
So I think everyone is racially specific, even down to the Latinx people and
Mm-hmm.
who is coded as white and who's not. So I just so that means like you cannot replace any of the white
Everybody
people with
who's not black, basically,
yeah,
is
exactly.
Indian. I actually gave it
Yeah.
to Teddy. Teddy seemed like the most like red flag of an Indiana Jones. It's like everything he does and says, and the way he does it and says it, like can only. He's so white. He's just so white that he has to be Indiana
He's
Jones to me.
white,
He's
white.
white. Yes, that's right. He's white with a hard H.
But he got,
Hard H.
but the
White.
funny thing is like Teddy's kind of like a deadbeat dad, and
Mm-hmm.
he's just kind of like a
Exactly. He's a
he's like
stereotypical. He's all the things you could say as a stereotypical black man.
this is a stereotypical black man in a crime movie. That's Teddy.
Yeah, that's 100%. And that's why I love this show so much is that they turn stereotypes on their head in a way that doesn't
Hmm.
that feels so realistic, and kind of just brings it's like it's more than representation. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like it's deeper than just like representation. Oh, we're just gonna have show with black people in it, or we're gonna
Right, right.
make this character black. It's a whole different thing. But yeah, that I mean, listen, we've gotten through our segments. If unless I
Uh-huh.
missed one, I don't think we did. Except the
Mm-mm.
cliffhanger. There's no. So I have a new word for cliffhanger. That's not a cliffhanger. All right, I've
What's that?
created a new term. So I have a cliffhanger theory. Is basically I thought there was three different types of cliffhangers. There's the burning question, the big reveal, and the main character activate. And I believe that there is when there's not a one, like I think the thing that is the most common when they don't use a cliffhanger is called the open ender. That's what I'm calling it. The open ender. The way that when it ends in a way that either you have a drone shot across a mountain or a stream, or like we pull back on like the big city, or we have a character in a car dropping a glory tear as they contemplate the emotional weight of their real internal life. It's these things that when it ends, the ending is not connected mostly to the plot, but it
Hmm.
it leaves you with not like a dopamine hit of a pull to watch. It's more
Hmm.
of a like a weekly. This is kind of suggestive also of a weekly show, a show that's going to
Hmm.
drop every on Fridays.
Right.
You're not ravenously like fumbling with the remote to hit the next
Right.
next episode button. You know what I mean? So that's what I would call like an open ender, and I think this is what this is. What do you feel? You agree?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, yeah, I agree with that because he's not really activated. He gets activated before, and now he's just
Yeah.
kind of dealing with like sort of the fallout and the ramifications of the decision that he made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it had ended with, you know, I'm trying to think of like where they could have stuck that cliffhanger, and maybe I don't know,
I don't
you
see
could have
where
made
it
it
would have
40.
worked, but I think it
Only
would
if you
have been
made the
like
show 45 minutes and you ended it
right,
with
and you just
Avi.
just or you cut it when Claudia like we don't know if Claudia buys the coke or not. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just
or Jerome says, "Get out of my house," and then he walks out of the house, and then we get a shot of him holding the coke, being like, "Okay, what the fuck do I do next?" You
yeah,
know?
and then they pull back.
Yeah, and
They
they
pull
pull
back
back.
on the coke, and then
But I don't think those are good ideas. I just,
no.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it ended fine for me. Again, it does make me still want to watch it, but it doesn't have that
Mhm.
like dopamine hit of
Right,
a cliffhanger. But
right.
anyway, so yeah, we've gone through our segments. We've covered Snowfall. What you watching, man?
Oh, I'm watching Succession. No, not Succession. Severance. I'm watching Severance. Another show with an S with white people. I'm watching Severance. I'm watching White Lotus, of course. Deep Space Nine. Lost. Yeah,
Nice,
I'm watching Lost, and I might start watching this. This is
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm actually watching. I'm into Severance now, man. I've gotten through the first season of Severance.
nice.
I'm halfway through the second season. I think I'm like 5 episodes into the second season of Severance
Yeah, dope.
into it. And then I'm watching White Lotus, but I'm hating White Lotus. I'm not gonna lie. It's kind of
Yeah,
trash to me. This third season is whack. I'm not feeling it.
yeah. It's not. It's not the strongest. I'm hoping that it'll pick up, but like,
Yeah.
it's none of the characters are. are
No,
very particularly interesting. Yeah.
no, it's whack. It's
And
whack. I mean,
even our boy Walter Goggins is
yeah,
like
he's doing his thing, but everybody's really doing their thing. You know what I mean? It's really
right.
not a function of the actors more so than the character and the writing for me. It's just like too slow. It's not active, and then it's like
Yeah.
you
Well, it's not
teased us with this opening that, and so now we're just waiting for
right.
that
It's also not
murderous opening. You know?
it's kind of not justifying the season, you
No,
know. Like
no.
season 2 justified them doing a second season, where like season 3 is just it just feels like we wanted to shoot in a cool place again.
Right, right, exactly. Right. So
So
anyway.
anyway.
Yeah, so that's what I'm watching. I finished Invincible, which I talked about last time, which I did not know was the season finale. And I've been sending memes and videos to Elijah feverishly
You
trying to
have
get him to
and I
watch
have
it.
no idea what this thing is about. I'm like, but I appreciate it. I appreciate the memes and the reels. It makes me feel,
I want you to
seen.
feel, yeah, I want you to feel seen as somebody who needs to watch it. I need you to feel like you're missing something. That's what I really want you to feel when I
You
send
want
you
me
these
to
things.
get FOMO? All right.
I do.
I'm getting it. I'm getting it.
All right, with that, thank you all for listening to the episode one show. We appreciate you listening. Listen, you guys are amazing. We want you guys to keep following us, keep listening, and also sharing it with your friends. Take this time to share this with a couple of your friends via text
Mm-hmm.
message, or just like, if you're in a conversation, people would ask like, what's your favorite podcast, what you listening to? Tell them you're listening to the episode one show. Listen,
Mm-hmm.
we really appreciate it, but we also appreciate it if you come to the Patreon page, patreon.com/, the episode one show. Got a lot of episodes early. We got a little bit of merch to share as well, so get on over there and contribute to keep us going. You can follow me on Instagram at Colin the Producer, and you can follow the show at the Episode One Show.
And you can follow me at Julian Elijah Martinez.
So thanks again for listening to the Episode One Show. And as Elijah says at the end of every episode,
Peace, peace, Mark ass Buster.
the accent was so crazy. It was like
Mark it.
close. It was like West Virginia and California had a baby.
I can't do accents. I'm
It,
terrible at
it's okay.
them.
All right, y'all. Peace.